Hello, everybody. I'm Rose Ross, and I'm the founder and chief trailblazer at the Tech Trailblazers Awards. And I'm here to record Judges on Fire with our good friend Ben Kepes from Diversity. Hello.
Hello, nice to see you and chat with you again.
Yeah, well, we were just talking about, we actually met at Heathrow Airport back in May 2019 to record this, where unfortunately the background noise and the clattering of coffee cups and chatter made it impossible to pick up any of the audio. So I'm sure we'll do a lot better, seeing as life's marched on and Zoom recordings and such like are the norm these days.
And the world's a very different place. It's only 2 years ago. It's a little over 2 years ago, but the world is a very different place today.
Yeah, if only we'd have known. If only we'd have known. But hey, so, you know, Ben, you've been with obviously a little bit of a little repose, little respite last year. You've been with us right from the beginning, and we actually spoke for the first time on Skype. So we were we were already trailblazing in communications back then, weren't we? And because I'd reached out to you on Twitter and said, would you mind, you know, getting involved and helping us? And you have, which has been fantastic. But just in case people don't know who Ben Kepes is, perhaps you could give us a little quick introduction to who you are and the kind of things that you get involved with on a day-to-day basis, and why you're interested in being part of the judging panel.
Yeah, sure. So as people will know, will sense from my accent, I'm from New Zealand, and I'm down here in New Zealand. But for the past, I guess, 15 years, I've been a tech industry analyst or commentator, and, you know, living in New Zealand, but working primarily internationally and mainly in Silicon Valley. And that's encompassed a bunch of different things. I was lucky enough to be very early on the sort of growth of cloud, and so along with what was then a very small bunch of people who were sort of all in on the cloud journey, I started talking about the early infrastructure players, Amazons and Rackspaces and those sorts of people, and SaaS. And that sort of extended, and in recent years, I've done a lot of angel investing. So I'm involved with 30, 40 or 50 different startups in different sectors all around the world. And I'm also a professional board member. So I sit on the board, a bunch of different boards, but technology, insurance, health sector, manufacturing. So I'm not a technologist per se. So my focus on technology is sort of the human and business aspects of it.
Yeah, fantastic. So, I mean, you say that, but obviously you do commentate, and you do quite a lot of blogging. And I guess these days you also send out your newsletter via LinkedIn, and there's always a really human element to it. I know that some of the ones recently, because obviously we've got a really challenging time at the moment, and your view, and we talked about it when we sat down at Heathrow Airport as well, about a lot of these aspects. And I think we started to talk about things like well-being, and, you know, you do a lot of stuff sort of around the periphery. I mean, I don't know how you do the directorships, the angel investing and the commentating and sleep, but perhaps because you're doing this at 6 o'clock in the morning, maybe you don't. So that's the secret keep sauce. But aside from all that stuff that you do, you also have some sort of ways of coping with things, because I mean, you're a runner, you run a lot. I mean, I follow you on Strava, and I can hardly keep up with the Strava stuff, let alone being able to do that at quite a healthy pace. How have you been finding that? Because I think a lot of people have taken up running, haven't they, over the last 18 months? But for you, it's something that's been part of your life for a long time.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, I could deeply psychoanalyze and say that the reason that I'm a runner and so focused on fitness is because my father passed away young from a heart attack or whatever. But for whatever reason, I am pretty focused on staying fit as much as I can. And so, yeah, I run. I'm a big runner. I do ultra marathons and stuff like that. And I find I would caveat it by saying that I don't have a day job. So while my LinkedIn looks really, really busy, it can look busy because I don't have a 9 to 5, and it gives me the luxury to do lots of things. But I guess the flip side of having that much stuff going on is that I need to make sure that I keep things in balance. And so so running is that for me. I run every day, and I find if I don't run for a couple of days, I get a little bit antsy, a little bit grumpy, and it's interesting. I can have a really big sort of thorny business problem or whatever that's stressing me out, and I'll go for a run, and it all kind of melts away. It gives one a little bit of perspective, I guess, on what's important and how important things really are or aren't, and in the scale of things, how much it really matters 5, 10, 100, 200 years down the track.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I did have a go at running. I'd always seem to pick up an injury the 2 times that I've experienced it. And I certainly, I don't know what the opposite of an ultra marathon is, but I'm pretty sure that was the area that I was in. But I do splash around in the pool. I do aqua aerobics, and I find that a really good time to think about things. And over lockdown, I've been doing a lot of walking. And again, that's the time when you just, all those things that have been on your mind sort of percolate through, and sometimes you get a really nice brew at the end of it, and sometimes you go, me, let's go for another walk, or let's go for another splash in the pool. So I think it is really important. I think there's something that's come to the fore for people as well, and hopefully that's one of at least the small, not small positive, it's a very positive, but a positive thing for a lot of people is that they have started to think about health and fitness and the importance of exercise, whatever that might be, whether it's a gentle stroll for 20-50 minutes, that whatever, out in the countryside or wherever you live, even if it's just pounding the pavements, or something a little bit more energetic like ultra marathon. So there's a whole spectrum of things that people can enjoy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah,
being active and how that promotes the brain, because ultimately we didn't spend, as we've evolved, we never really spent very much time sitting at desk thinking about things. Tapping on the computer just wasn't part of it. We are designed to be active. That's our
absolutely,
that's the way we work, right? And our bodies are built for that, and obviously our minds are built for that as well. And we can't reprogram that over a couple of generations. So we've got to go with the flow. Evolution will just have to try and keep up with us. So that's another thing. So there's another thing that I think fascinating. So on top of the running, all the business interests, and I know you're being very generous in saying, well, I haven't got a 9 to 5. You've probably got a 6 to 9, and then sort of some weekends and doing other stuff. But you also volunteer for the local fire service as well, don't you?
Yeah, so we're lucky. I live in a little rural area in New Zealand, and so we've got a little hobby farm or whatever. And in New Zealand, like many other countries, and especially in rural areas, volunteerism is the sort of lifeblood of community and of society. And so we moved to this district, and we didn't know anyone. At that stage, we didn't have kids, and so the absolute natural thing to do for me was to join the local fire brigade, and I've been a member there for 23 years now, and it's great. Like I put in a lot of time and effort, and we go to lots of fires and medical events and car crashes and things like that. But it's also a really rewarding thing to do. I mean, it's a lot of camaraderie, and you see some horrible things, but because of that, you build some really strong connections with people, and so. I really enjoy doing that as well.
Yeah, well, it's a part about, as you say, getting that perspective on life as well, about what's really important. And there are certain scenarios when everything else pales into insignificance, and there is just one job to do, and that's to keep someone alive, or to put out a fire that's endangering life, or whether that's human or otherwise. So so thank you for that. There are lots of people who are doing what you're doing, so really, really, really appreciate it. Although obviously you'll never get to do a direct sort of thing for here, but hopefully you're doing something good for the greater community. So that's brilliant. So I guess we better talk about the awards, although the other stuff it's very, very interesting. So we brought on, you've been primarily involved with the cloud category. And obviously when we started this 10 years ago, cloud was still emerging. It was still a little bit edgy, and people were kind of yes, and software as a service and all this kind of stuff, and now obviously bringing it into the whole cloud native. We've really accelerated as well the digital transformation we're seeing due to the fact that the pandemic has forced us to now all work from home, or a lot of us to work from home, and the impact that's had on the infrastructure that organizations need to have. But what have you seen as being particularly interesting over the last 10 years, say, and what are you sort of seeing, you're likely to be seeing from entrants this year? And just so you know, the cloud category is still very popular, even though it's maybe seen as being a little bit retro these days, perhaps.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think that my lens, and the reason why I first got interested in technology and talking about it and stuff 15 years ago or more, was the thing with cloud as a way of delivering software is that it democratizes things. My background is small business. I still own and run a small manufacturing business, and what cloud has enabled is that we can obtain solutions and new solutions that formerly would have been hugely expensive, too expensive, too big, too hard. And so, you see those, and that's, I guess my first focus on that was software as a service. And so with SaaS, taking the old days, you had, SAP and Oracle or nothing. And now to the days where you've got things like, Xero and all of the add-on solutions and app marketplaces and tiny little point solutions. And I think what happens, if I reflect back to maybe sort of 2008, that sort of era, it was the start of the first generation of enterprise SaaS was sort of Salesforce and NetSuite and those sorts of companies, which were still big enterprise solutions essentially. And then sort of 2008, you had the likes of Zendesk and New Relic and Good Data and those sorts of companies that were much, much more point solutions. And I think what we'll see in the competitions this year is an even finer, winnowing down of solutions where, in the old days, if you were doing simply, if you were doing, an employee NPS solution, like you couldn't build a business out of just doing employee NPS. But today you absolutely can. There's probably 500 companies doing different variations of employee NPS. And so I expect to see that happening. And I think the interesting thing for me, and it's what I'm sure a lot of the companies will be thinking about, is as you get that spread of lots and lots of different point solutions, whether it's infrastructure or software, there's this sort of corresponding requirement for single panes of glass. That used to be the buzzword, but something to tie that all together, whether it's tying it together by APIs and those sorts of things, or whether it's monitoring or whatever. So I think that you've got this corresponding thing. You've got this much higher granularity of solutions, but you've also got a need to tie those solutions together better. So I think that's what we're starting to see and what we've started to see over the past couple of years.
Yeah, it will be very interesting. I haven't had a chance to dive in yet, but I'm sure you'll be feeding back on stuff. And obviously we've brought in some new categories. Containers, obviously cloud native is one of those, and that's grown. But the problem we're seeing with that one is we almost lose the companies as fast as they enter. Like every winner has either had a huge amount of investment or has actually been acquired. So it's almost like there's an acceleration in that whole process now, because usually, you'd say, you've got a couple of years to develop your hardware, your amazing enterprise tech, flashing lights, the whole shebang. Now, of course, with it being software only, delivered via the cloud, accelerated by that whole move to the cloud, people are kind of building businesses, spinning them up, I guess, if we want to use some, some terminology from the data center or from the cloud itself.
I think there's you're right, and there's some macro trends that come into that. So I think, again, if I think about the sort of 2008, the likes of Zendesk, for example, they started, they went for a few years, they got a bit of funding, did a few more rounds, took sort of 6, 7, 8 years, and then IPO. Same with New Relic, same with lots of them. What we're seeing now, because interest rates globally are so low, and because there's money, just an absolute flood of money pouring into tech. There's just so much funding, and so it gives companies an option to stay private longer. It means they can raise more readily. There's some flip sides to that. I mean, I was very involved in the OpenStack community from day one, when it was just a project out of Rackspace. And we saw that gain huge hype, massive investment, huge number of startups, and frankly, it was a bit of a disaster, and a lot of that money was wasted. So I fully expect that, over the pandemic, we have seen, because of interest rates, we've seen money absolutely pour into tech. I fully expect that a significant proportion of those companies and of that money will be lost. That's creative destruction. I mean, that's the way it works. It's going to be interesting, and I think you're right. Like, it's interesting to look back and think about the companies that did well in previous years, the awards, and sort of mapping their journey with the economic cycles, because obviously, what's perfect is to start a company today when there's huge money, lots of good valuations, lots of funding. But what about those companies that started around the GFC, like the Zendesk and the like, where things were a lot tighter, and sort of mapping their lifespans to the economic cycles?
Yeah, well, we've got a very unusual situation. I mean, we've certainly seen the huge investments into the cloud space, into the cybersecurity space, AI. And unsurprisingly, that's reflected in where a lot of the very popular categories are for entrants as well. But we do have a couple of new ones, and they're actually beyond startups, so out into the ecosystem. So I'd be very curious, with your experience of working as an angel investor and advising, I'm sure, a lot of the VC community and a lot of startups themselves. So we focused on investment and diversity, because those are two areas where we're seeing a lot of activity. I mean, obviously, diversity has been a big topic within tech for a long period of time. And we're not just talking about gender or ethnicity, we're looking at the whole, basically anything that could be seen as, we just want an equal playing field for everybody. And I think that the tech will benefit from that, and companies will benefit from that, because we're getting that, rounded viewpoint on solutions and on the way to do business. But again, in investment terms, one of the things we want to look at is, where are we seeing innovative approaches to investment, whether that's bringing people together, sort of almost like lead angels, bringing other sort of mini angels along, those types of things. So how have you seen that the whole investment space has changed? Because really what you're saying is there were less companies to invest in, say, 10 years ago. And they weren't getting as much money, so they weren't getting so much help effectively. Whereas now there's, if I look at the amount of VCs out there, if you're a startup looking for funding, I don't know where you start. You literally could pitch, every day, all day, for a couple of years, and still not have actually pitched to every single organization which could potentially be an investor in your business.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, maybe I'm just sounding old and negative, but I do worry about the risks of, every woman and her dog now being a VC and being able to raise, squillions of dollars and to do a fund. In the same way that it worries me where everyone can call themselves an angel investor and go along to these, wine and cheese evenings and play the game talking themselves up as an investor. And I think that what has troubled me for the longest time is the fact the playing field isn't level. And so I'm well aware that if I'm wearing my angel investor hat, all I bring to the table is a bit of money and maybe a little bit of experience. The entrepreneur is bringing their life. They're working 24 hours a day, not sleeping, all of the stress, all of the risk, and it really pains me to see angel investors having to be wined and dined and to invest in companies. I mean, they should be, they're privileged to be able to ride on that journey for a period of time. And so I think that the same in the VC space. I mean, I love my VC friends who are smart and helpful and want to be involved and can help take a company to the next level. But what I don't like is this sort of pump and dump approach where someone will raise a bunch of money, will hire a graduate just out of university who doesn't even shave yet, be they male or female, to kind of work the phones and make the connections. And it's that absolutely sounds ageist, and I'm not trying to stop. I think it's awesome that young people can get into the industry, but in a past life, I did an apprenticeship. I'm an electrician by trade, and so I really like the idea of doing your time. You learn a trade, you learn a craft, you learn about the people, you learn about the processes, and simply raising a few $1 million and having a shiny MBA or whatever doesn't give you that experience. And absolutely, that sounds like an old man, clutching on to a world that has passed by. But yeah, that's kind of the way I think. So I think that I think it's great that you're extending the awards to recognise investors, because they are a very important part of the ecosystem, and I hope that casts sort of light and clarity as opposed to this sort of superhuman thing. I mean, I've spent a little bit of time with Mark Andreessen Horowitz, and I mean, obviously, he's got a brain the size of the planet. He's insanely smart. But this sort of rock star thing that he's got going on, I feel a little bit uncomfortable about it, because yes, he's incredibly smart, but he was lucky to be in the right place at the right time and have other people taking him on the journey. We're all simply a sum of the component parts of people that have helped us through life or whatever. And I think that anyone that sort of purports to have done it on their own and not needed any help is probably a little bit fraudulent. I'm not saying Mark Andreessen is fraudulent, but that whole superstar VC thing, I feel a bit.
Well, I think it's just that he who wins owns the narrative, right?
Yeah, totally. To the winner goes the spoils, and yeah, and I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I sound like a crazy hippie, but in 100 years' time, I'm fairly certain that. I mean, Mark Andreessen probably does blood transfusions from 14-year-old, Silicon Valley folks, so maybe he will live to 300. But outside of that, I'm pretty sure that him and I will be dead. And the fact that he was a superstar VC 200 years ago probably makes no difference on the scale of things. And I think it's important to, we should strive, absolutely, and all of the entrepreneurs in the competition are striving every day to be successful. I think it's also important at the same time to realize, not that it's futile, but to realize that, this too shall pass, I guess.
Very important, very Deepak Chopra there. So I know that I've done quite a lot of meditation over lockdown to try and keep everything balanced for sure. But yeah, I think that perspective, shall we say. And at the end of the day, you meet Mick Jagger and he's just still a guy, right? Yeah. Or whoever it might be, Beyonce,
Yeah,
good
totally.
singer can shake it up, baby. But at the end of the day, we're all human, and we've all got to, yeah, get on with stuff and be
We're
part of
all,
the
we're
team.
all broken in our own ways,
In
and
our own beautiful ways, Ben, we're all broken. That's for sure.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, I think that's the challenge, isn't it? That we've got to. It's almost like demystify things a little bit, and work on partnerships. I mean, that's always been a really big thing from that perspective. That I think that you can bring money to the table, but you need to be part of a partnership, really, in that type of thing. And I'm sure,
absolutely.
obviously, as an angel investor with a lot of companies, you know, you can love the idea, you can love the team, but ultimately you've got to find a balance where you know that you can support them. And as you say, you bring a lot of experience, but I think you'd like to feel that it is more than just money that you're bringing to the table.
Absolutely. Yeah, I tend to, probably because I've got time, I tend to be more involved rather than less in my startups. And so what I tend to have is that sort of slight feeling of grief when they grow up beyond my, the utility of the little bit of help that I can give. And so that's kind of a little bit bittersweet. It's like, wow, this company's actually gone to the next level. And it's kind of like when your kids leave home, I guess. But it's great. It's great to at some tiny level to help someone to fulfill their dream. Is probably sounds a little bit dramatic, but that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's hard work, isn't it? I mean, I think just having people along the way who can kind of keep you positive is really important, because it is hard work. Like you say, people are working incredibly hard, and that's why I love doing this, because you really do feel that this is a chance for some of them, obviously not all of them, but for some of them to at least be acknowledged for all the hard work that they get, and provide a bit of reward. And I love the whole podcast stuff, because I get to talk to everybody who's won now, which is it's supposed to be a benefit for them, but I really enjoy it too. So that's important. And all of this, the little parts of this all build up to the bigger impact, don't they? If you can just by one conversation convince somebody to keep going, or just point them in a direction that then become, and it's just those little moments sometimes that can make a massive difference. I mean, we've all had them, that I'm going to give up on this, I don't want to do this anymore, and then you have this conversation with somebody who goes, but you're amazing at that, or maybe you just need to look at it from this perspective, and it can just pivot the whole.
And that's, I guess that's the kind of nub of, I guess, mentorship. And again, without wanting to be dramatic, like it's a real privilege to, at some tiny level, be able to be, a sounding board or an aid or whatever. I mean, the reality is that I don't have the attention span or the energy to do a startup myself anymore. So to be able to kind of vicariously take part in others, is awesome, and to be able to help them in some tiny way on their journey is really great.
Fantastic. So, I mean, bearing in mind the fact that you've judged, since the beginning, you've got a huge amount of experience. Our entry forms are really focused on almost presenting what you would present to an investor, right? What's your market traction? What are you bringing to the table? What problems are you solving, et cetera, et cetera. What would be your top tips? So, whether people are pitching you an idea or whether they're entering the awards, what's going to make Ben go, oh, I really like that. Yeah, I think that's got something going on there.
Yeah, and so I mean, my kind of approach to investment is the same as my approach to judging competitions. And I guess the important thing to note is that that's because I don't actually know about this stuff. I'm not a technologist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a developer. And so while I understand concepts, I can't actually say, oh yeah, this is a great UI for development. This one isn't so good. So I default to the same things, which is, frankly, do I like and respect this person, and do I think they have the ability to execute? And so, you know, obviously that's easier in person or face to face, but that can absolutely. I've read competition entries where, I could really sense that this was a person that thought deeply and knew where they were going and was able to get there. So that's the first thing. Alongside that is their team that can execute this. But also, and it's kind of a bit of a balance point. I want to read an entry or hear a pitch from someone who absolutely understand where their product sits in a broader world, or so in a broader sort of technology landscape, and can articulate why that is important, but not to the point where they bring out the whole making the world a better place through intelligent data and analytics claims or whatever. So perspective, ambition, but perspective. And so, is I guess is borne out by what I've said. I'll probably err to the sort of humanistic side of things. And so a person who say, look, I'm absolutely focused on doing this. I'm involved with a startup right now, which is kind of a New Zealand take on Ocado, supermarket play. And the founder of that is, and she's amazing. She's incredible. She's totally passionate and totally committed to what she's doing. Making money, building wealth, having a big stake isn't her focus. This is a problem that she absolutely wants to solve, and she knows the problem backwards. She comes from a family that's involved in that sector. She's spent 3 years researching, so she knows it backwards. So that's the sort of thing that is really easy to get on board with, because you've got a person that knows what they need to do, isn't focused simply by making by building a billion-dollar business, because that's just because that drops out of executing well. If that is your focus, then something's misaligned. So those are the sorts of things. I think that it is hard because the competitions tend to have a tech heavy entrant pool, and so often technologists are a little bit poor at sort of articulating the why in terms that us mere mortals can understand. So I would really encourage entrants to spend some time, put their entry past their buddy that's a tradesperson or an artist or something. Get your mum or dad to read it. Try and make sure that it doesn't sound like a foreign language that doesn't connect with people, because when you're building a company, it's the same. If you're building an enterprise technology company, it comes down to selling a product, and you sell through connection. Yes, the thing that I'm selling has to be able to fulfill the requirement, but there's lots of different products that will do that. Can you, as a person that's trying to sell me a product, connect to me and convince me that this is the right thing? And it's the same whether you're pitching for funding, whether you're entering a competition, whether you're selling a product, or whether you're eventually selling your business to an acquirer.
Yeah, it's some good advice there. Some good advice, and passion is one of the things that it's very hard, I know, to get out on paper. So obviously there's a little bit of restriction there, but it's certainly something that comes across when we interview the winners. There's always a lot of really dynamic energy around the founders, because that's usually who we chat to when we do the podcast with the winners. So exciting times. And we've also got the male and female trailblazers as well, where we look at the startup founders, and that was very, very popular last year. So hopefully you might get a chance to have a peek at some of those entries as well, if you've got the time, Ben.
Awesome.
Yeah, so exciting times where we've covered an awful lot of ground. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else that you'd like to share that you think is important for people to know about, this type of competition or just the space that you're seeing, maybe outside of the cloud world? Is there anything else that you see as burning interesting?
Well, I think, yeah. So I think maybe because I'm getting older, I've become a little bit more philosophical. So appreciation. It sort of struck me just before that we've probably been a little bit lax because you've done this for a decade, and you do it for at some level there's probably a bit of business that comes out of it, but primarily you do it because it's the right thing to do. So I think it's important, and as I say, I've been lax and not articulating it previously. It's important to recognise what you do in terms of putting the awards on and running them, and know how much work it is. And so I think that that's my little example there of we probably all need to try a little bit harder to take some time out of our day and our horror and angst that we articulate on Twitter at the drop of a hat to actually show some appreciation. Whether it's paying it forward and buying somebody, a stranger, a coffee next time you're at the cafe, or thanking someone who puts in huge amounts of work to put on a competition such as this. I think it's it's what separates us from the animals, and it's probably something that we've got a little bit slack at. But I think that maybe out of the pandemic, that can maybe refocus us on being a little bit appreciative for our part in the world and for others.
Yeah, well, it's certainly something that I really enjoy, and so I get payment from the passion of everybody and getting involved and being involved in making a difference. And we've found that the virtual world has now become a lot more, people understand it. People couldn't understand the virtual awards, so you don't have to dress up and go and have a dinner, and how does that all work? So, well, if it's global, how would we expect New Zealand, well, particularly now because you're not allowed to travel really, not unless you don't go back for 18 months, or people in India or China, or if we're doing, where would we do that where everybody would congregate freely?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's another playing field thing. It's kind of like, if you have a physical event, you can't invite everybody, you can't have everybody there because there'll be travel issues, expense. It's not inexpensive to travel around the world, particularly if you're just going on the off chance of winning an award, which obviously we see that as beneficial, but I couldn't justify somebody go on a plane in case you get to pick up an award. So now we can do all this stuff a lot more virtually, and the technology is there for us to do a little bit more. So we might well be doing a little bit more. So we will see how that all pans out. But it's been a pleasure, and I really wish we got to have a coffee at an airport or somewhere where it wasn't so noisy, so we could have done this. But this is great too. And thank you very much for acknowledging what myself and the team have been up to, because everybody does work very hard in the background. And we also very much appreciate you taking the time, and all of our judges who dedicate their time, volunteer their time to look at what all of our entrants have been up to. So that's awesome. Thank you, Ben.
Nice.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. My name is Rose Ross, and I'm here on Tech on Fire, Judges on Fire with Ben Kepes from Diversity. And we are chatting thousands of miles apart, all thanks to the technology and a load of enterprise tech at the back end. So if you'd like to find out more, please have a look online at www.techtrailblazers.com. Follow us on Twitter or find us on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.